I need to warn other mothers about what happened to me last week in Texas. I'm still processing the trauma, still shaking when I think about it. What I'm about to tell you sounds unbelievable. I wouldn't believe it myself if I hadn't lived through it. But every word is true, and I need you to understand what can happen to pregnant women who admit they're struggling. I'm 9 weeks pregnant with a baby my fiancé and I desperately wanted. We planned his pregnancy. We were excited. But then I developed hyperemesis gravidarum, a condition that goes far beyond normal morning sickness. Imagine feeling like you're about to vomit every single second of every single day. Not just in the morning, all day, all night, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The nausea is so intense, it triggers full-blown panic attacks. It peaks at night, making sleep impossible, which makes the anxiety exponentially worse. I couldn't keep down food or liquids. I was losing weight I couldn't afford to lose. My body was failing me, and I was terrified for my baby. This wasn't my first time seeking help. I'd already been to the ER twice before. Both times I'd been treated by female doctors at different locations. Both had been compassionate and helpful. They'd given me IV hydration, prescribed anti-nausea medication, and most importantly, they'd treated me like a human being, suffering from a legitimate medical condition rather than a problem to be dealt with. After another brutal night of vomiting and panic attacks, I called my mother in the morning, sobbing. I was so miserable, so desperate for relief, that I could barely form coherent sentences. She immediately said she'd take me to a different ER, one at a full hospital that had OBGYNs on staff. We thought someone specializing in pregnancy would be better equipped to help me navigate medications and treatment options that were safe for the baby. It seemed logical. This was clearly a pregnancy-related medical crisis, so why not see doctors who dealt with pregnancy every day? When we arrived, I was assigned to a male ER doctor. Our entire conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. 5 minutes to determine what would become a 72-hour nightmare. I explained my situation as clearly as I could through my exhaustion and nausea. I told him about waking up nauseated every single day, about the panic attacks that followed, about my complete inability to sleep or keep anything down. I told him how the combination of constant vomiting and anxiety was making me feel trapped in my own body. And yes, in my desperation, I said it. I'm so miserable from these symptoms that I don't want to be pregnant anymore. But I want to be absolutely clear about what I meant and what I said next. I just wanted medical help for my symptoms. I had no plan to hurt myself or anyone else. I wasn't suicidal. I was sick and desperate and needed a doctor to help me, which is literally why I had come to the hospital in the first place. The doctor refused to give me any medication, not even an IV bag for hydration, the most basic, standard intervention for someone who can't keep fluids down. Nothing. Instead, he sent a social worker to my room. The social worker talked to me about my panic attacks. She said she could find a facility that would help me with medication and sleep. After sitting in that ER for hours with absolutely no medical intervention, no relief, nothing, I was so desperate I would have agreed to anything if it meant I might finally get help. The ER doctor never called the OB department, never consulted with anyone who specialized in pregnancy, never ordered an ultrasound. He just decided he wasn't his problem and passed me off to someone else. The social worker came back and said she'd found a place that would take me. She made it sound like a solution, like they'd be equipped to help with my medication needs and get me the sleep I so desperately needed. I thought I was being transferred to some kind of specialized care facility for pregnant women with severe symptoms. I didn't realize until much later that she was sending me to a locked psychiatric hospital. Nobody used those words. Nobody said psychiatric facility or mental hospital or locked ward. If they had, I would never have agreed to go. But I was exhausted, sick, and trusting that medical professionals had my best interests at heart. By the time I got through their intake and processing, it was 3 a.m. I was crying from sheer exhaustion and anxiety, my body trembling from lack of sleep and constant nausea. They didn't give me my nighttime medications, not the Unisom and B6 I'd been taking for nausea, not my prenatal vitamins, nothing. I finally fell into bed around 4 a.m., so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. They woke me up at 6 a.m. for vitals, 2 hours of sleep after days of insomnia. The moment I woke up, the nausea hit me like a physical assault. I immediately asked for Zofran, desperate to stop the waves of nausea before they triggered another panic attack. They refused. I had to see the internal medicine doctor first, hospital policy. I didn't get Zofran until 10:30 in the morning. By that point, I'd missed breakfast entirely and had been vomiting nonstop for hours. My throat was raw and bleeding. I'd pulled a muscle in my neck from the sheer force of the vomiting, making it painful to even turn my head. When they finally gave me medication, the doctor would only authorize one 4-milligram pill every 12 hours. One tiny pill. For someone who'd been vomiting continuously for days. I was sicker than I'd been at home, sicker than I'd been in any of the previous ERs, and now I was trapped in a locked facility with no way out. Eventually, I was seen by a psychiatrist, the on-call doctor who clearly didn't want to be there on a Saturday. I thought surely he'd be able to help me, to prescribe something for the anxiety and panic attacks, to coordinate proper anti-nausea medication with my pregnancy. Instead, he told me he couldn't give me anything because I was pregnant. I'd have to talk to a different doctor, the attending physician, who wasn't going to be in until Monday. Monday. 2 more days away? I lost it. I was away from home, away from my fiancé and my mother and everyone who loved and supported me. They weren't giving me my over-the-counter medications that had been helping. They weren't giving me enough Zofran to control the vomiting. And now I was being told I'd have to wait 2 more days to even talk to someone who might be able to help me. I want to leave, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I want to go home. The psychiatrist's expression changed immediately. He got angry, actually visibly angry that I was requesting to leave. He said I'd have to sign an AMA form against medical advice and that he'd place me on a 24-hour hold. The other doctor would talk to me before those 24 hours were up and determine if they'd try to get a court order to keep me longer. I was genuinely shocked. Is there any way I can talk to someone about this? I came here voluntarily. I don't want to stay when you're not even treating me. No, he said flatly. That's when the full reality of my situation hit me like a freight train. I wasn't a patient receiving care. I was a prisoner. I went back to my room in a panicked, sick mess and started frantically going through all the paperwork they'd given me during admission. That's when I found it, the Patient Bill of Rights. It clearly stated that patients had the right to be discharged within 4 hours of their request unless the doctor believed they were a danger to themselves or others, or that they were mentally unable to make medical decisions for themselves. I requested a written justification from the psychiatrist outlining which of those reasons he was using to justify the 24-hour hold. He refused. He just kept repeating that I wasn't allowed to leave until I spoke with the attending doctor, who wouldn't be in until the next day. This was illegal, completely, undeniably illegal. Their staffing schedule does not supersede my rights as a patient. Around 3:30 that afternoon, my mom and fiancé came for visitation hours. I brought my paperwork with me and showed them the patient rights documents. They were absolutely furious. They stayed 2.5 hours past when visiting hours ended, arguing with the staff to release me. The logic was simple. I wasn't being treated for anything. They were withholding medications I needed.
There was no therapeutic justification for keeping me there. They were literally just holding me against my will without providing any care whatsoever. The doctor refused to even speak with my family, despite the fact that I'd specifically included them on my medical release forms. They had a legal right to request that information. It escalated to the point where my mom, a retired police officer who now works in records at a neighboring police department, called the actual police and filed a report about what was happening. They still refused to let me go. I had to stay another night without adequate anti-nausea medication, another night unable to sleep, unable to eat, unable to keep food or water down. There was no doctor on staff overnight, so when the nurses tried calling to get my Zofran prescription increased, no one answered. They couldn't do anything for me. I could tell the nurses were trying their best and were genuinely frustrated on my behalf. One of them even told my family privately that he didn't believe I belonged there, that this situation was wrong. But their hands were tied. I spent that night in a tiny room with paper-thin scrubs and a blanket that barely covered me, vomiting into a toilet while strangers walked past my door, crying between waves of nausea, terrified they were going to get a court order to keep me there indefinitely. At one point, I was laying on the cold bathroom floor, too weak to even stand, wondering if I was going to die there, wondering if they'd take me to court and force me to stay longer without treatment, without my family. The panic was suffocating. I wasn't sure how I'd survive it. The original psychiatrist came back exactly 1 hour before the 24 hours were up. He clearly did not want to talk to me. I think the attending doctor had said he wasn't getting involved because the situation had turned into a legal issue with police reports and angry family members demanding answers. The psychiatrist was incredibly short with me. When I again requested written justification for the 24-hour hold, he said the ER doctor had documented that I said I didn't want to be pregnant anymore, and that was sufficient justification. I was absolutely floored. That was it? Saying I didn't want to be pregnant anymore while desperately sick and asking for medical help was grounds for involuntary psychiatric detention? The implications were staggering. By that logic, any pregnant woman in Texas who admitted she was struggling, who said those magic words, "I don't want to be pregnant anymore," could be locked up in a psychiatric facility against her will. He didn't want to discuss it further. He just wanted me gone before this became an even bigger problem for the hospital. He discharged me quickly, but apparently no one knew how to process a discharge on the weekend, so it took several more hours before I could actually leave. I'm currently staying at my mom's house, finally getting some rest. I'm able to take enough Zofran and Unisom with B6 to keep the vomiting somewhat under control. I'm trying my best to avoid another panic attack, though just thinking about what happened makes my heart race and my hands shake. Like in Texas right now, admitting you're struggling with pregnancy, admitting the symptoms are making you miserable, is enough to get you locked up. I wanted to move out of Texas before I got pregnant, specifically because I was worried about situations like this. Doctors here are too afraid to treat pregnant women because of the abortion ban. It's safer for them to do nothing, even if it's more detrimental to the mother and baby, than to prescribe something and potentially be held legally liable if anything goes wrong. It's a horrible, horrible byproduct of the current political climate around reproductive health care. The psychiatric facility itself had only been open for 10 months. They had empty beds to fill and seemed to be accepting anyone to fill them, regardless of whether they were properly equipped to provide appropriate care. I spoke with other patients there who confirmed the facility wasn't properly supportive for patients with disabilities or who were pregnant. I felt terrible for the other patients who clearly needed actual psychiatric help. The doctor was so obviously uninterested and uncaring, I couldn't see how anyone there was getting the appropriate level of care they needed, or how being in that facility would make anyone less suicidal or more stable. It seemed like the hospital existed to fill beds and extract as much money as possible from insurance, while running a skeleton crew of workers who provided the minimum legal requirement of care, if that. 2 days after I was released, I saw my OBGYN and had my first ultrasound. My little boy is measuring right on time with a heartbeat of 167 beats per minute. I feel overwhelmed with relief knowing he's safe and doing well despite everything I've been through. I explained the entire situation to my OB, and she was incredibly understanding and supportive. She gave me a new prescription for Zofran and took labs to check my electrolytes and other levels. I have another follow-up scheduled soon. I feel comfortable working with her, which is such a relief after the nightmare of the past week. For the first time since this ordeal began, I feel like I'm actually receiving competent medical care. I'm going to file formal complaints with the hospital and with the state medical board about what happened. I'm also consulting with lawyers to see if I have a case against them for false imprisonment, for medical negligence, for violating my patient rights. I do plan to eventually come forward publicly with my full story, including the names of the facilities and doctors involved. I want to speak with a lawyer first and make sure all my legal ducks are in a row. I'm also semi-notable in a niche professional field and haven't been public with my pregnancy yet. I take my privacy very seriously. But I won't let what they did to me be forgotten, and I won't let them do it to anyone else if I can help it. If you're pregnant in Texas, please be extremely careful about what you say in emergency rooms. I never imagined that 5 words, "I don't want to be pregnant anymore," spoken in the context of describing unbearable symptoms, could result in being locked up without proper treatment. There are safe anxiety medications during pregnancy. Having constant panic attacks while being unable to keep down food or water is not safe for the pregnancy or baby either. You have to weigh the risks of each decision, and doctors should be helping you do that, not imprisoning you for admitting you're struggling. Pregnant women deserve medical care, not imprisonment. We deserve to be treated with dignity and compassion when we're at our most vulnerable, not punished for admitting we need help. What happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone, but based on the messages I've received since sharing my story, I know I'm not alone. There's clearly a much bigger systemic issue happening here. If this has happened to you, please know you're not alone. Please know it wasn't your fault. And please know that we deserve better.